Hello and welcome to day 24 of the Halloween Journal Challenge. I want to thank Kia from InspiringJournals and KiaCreates for hosting this fun and spooky event and for inviting me and other wonderful creatives to this Halloween collaboration. Whether you've been following since day one or if you're just joining in today, it's all good. As you know, there's no missing out or being behind. Just work at your pace, skip around, do your thing, and have fun. I'm thrilled to have costumes and disguises for my prompt. You see, I was a costume designer for a local youth theater, designing 18 shows, which meant I was doing 2 to 4 shows a season. That's a story for another time, but I wanted to share a picture from the 2016 production of Sweeney Todd. And if there's a great show that falls in line with Halloween, it's Sweeney Todd, the demon barber of Fleet Street. If you're not familiar, I hope you'll check it out. The revival is currently on Broadway, starring Josh Groban and Annalee Ashford. My daughter recently saw the show, and I really wish I could have been there. Over the years, many of our performers went on to pursue professional careers on Broadway, television, education, cinema, and more. In fact, this young lady who played our Mrs. Lovett is currently in the West End production of Six, and she has a lead role as Catherine Parr. Here are the journals I made for the challenge. At the time of filming, they're still works in progress. And why 2 journals? Well, I'll explain that in a few moments. I usually work with a lot of color, but for some reason I ended up challenging myself and decided to work monochromatically. Besides, it really hits that Halloween vibe. So I thought working with grunge and muted colors would be a good practice. But again, it is a bit of a challenge to work this way without throwing in a dash of neon or something similar to that. As you can see, I chose a gray-green palette for both journals. So this is the first journal I made. I knew I wanted to use the Holtz Idea-ology Accordion Journal, but I knew I wouldn't have enough room for 31 prompts. But I've had this for the longest time, so it was really great to work with. And there are so many variations that you can create from this structure. And I used a lot of Tim's fabulous ephemera and accessories for this project. I painted the inside and outside with graphite watercolors and distressed mica sprays. And you can configure your journal in several ways. I kept it simple with the 2 pockets on either side. And just in case I needed more room, I created this little mini journal here with just 8 pages inside, and it tucks away nicely within that little fold out. Oh, and I want to give a shout out to the members of Tim's design team. Their creations are seriously mind-blowing, and I drew so much inspiration from many of them, and the way they use every little bit of all that good stuff is just incredible to me. So anyway, I wanted to mention that. Here's the second journal. It's really a sidekick. Again, it was for extra room, extra pages to work on the prompts. And this is just a simple single signature. Say that 3 times. And there are, it's a single signature with 8 pages, so that really gives you 32 pages back to back. And the covers are made of cardboard, and I covered everything with an assortment of Tim's background papers because they work really well. And I'm especially crazy over the proscenium that I was able to create there with Tim's baseboards and create that stage on the cover. It's very, very simple, and it just has the whole look and feel that I was vibing at the time. So today I'm going to share 2 simple background techniques using gesso as a resist and using them with acrylic and watercolor paint. Rather than working in a spread in the journal, I thought I would just demo things on a tag. And before we start, I just want to take a moment to talk about these tags. I am using these Ranger Distress tags for a reason. They are very sturdy, there's a good weight to them, and they won't buckle, if you will, or tear once we start working with them. Now, I'm a big proponent of using what you have, and I know many of us have just regular manila tags such as the one you see here. And ordinarily, I would say just go for it. And I still do. However, I'm going to say that if you have these tags and don't want to run out and get the distress tags, you might want to cut some out onto watercolor paper or Bristol paper. And it's just, as simple as that. But again, if you'd rather just go ahead and use these manila ones, feel free to do that too. You'll watch the technique. It's nice and messy, but I have overworked a tag or two in the past, and that's no fun. So that's just my little spiel on the tags we'll be using today. Here's what you'll need for the first technique. Medium or heavy body acrylic paint. Any brand will do. Craft paint is fine, but just stay away from fluid acrylics. You'll need gesso, regular or heavy, in tubes or the jars are best. Again, no fluid gesso. And baby wipes and small pieces of cardboard or watercolor paper scraps. So here I've got 2 tags, and there's my scrap piece of watercolor paper. And what you want to do is get some gesso onto that little card there. And this technique, I don't know what you want to call it. It's kind of like a skip and drag. But the idea is not to just slap it down and pull. You want to get a little bit of, there's that skipping, like it's not, skipping, that means you're skipping some areas. Now, I'm not doing a very good job here, I admit, and that's because I do better when I'm not thinking hard. So anyway, just get some gesso down and keep at it. So this is real. So I'm applying it where I think I want to create the resisted areas, if you will. And there's no right or wrong, just go for it. And the idea is you don't want it too thick, you don't want it too thin. And I just let these sit for about a minute and a half maybe. So it's not exactly dry, and you still have the ability to wipe that gesso off. And that's the next step. So choose 2 colors. I think for this, you want to limit yourself to 3 colors on one tag, but I'm just going to use 2 colors. And I like having a dark and then a light, if you will, or a contrasting color, or this is where you really want to experiment with colors and just have fun. So I had put 2 of the raw umber, I believe that's raw umber. I'll put everything in the description box. And then I have this ultramarine blue. And you start with, dabs of paint, not too much, and you take your baby wipe. And now I'm going to wipe and swipe that paint on top of the gesso. And what happens is you are pulling away the wet gesso, and what's left behind is what you see there that stays on the tag. Right now, it's going through its ugly phase. It's like, what is that? It's pretty bad. But watch what happens when I maneuver the paint so it's this dip and twist, if you will. And now you're creating this grungy textural appearance on the tag itself. And it really morphs right in front of your eyes. And just keep going until you like what you see. Here's a little close-up. And you just go back and forth with the paint. I mean, this is what I mean about using a regular manila folder tag. Because it is thin, you can tear some of the fibers if you're not careful about it. Do not add water to this process. I'll let you watch as we work on these tags. I go back and forth, and I'll meet you at the end. And that's it. So, I'm working with a specific color palette, so use what works for you and have fun. Keep playing and let these dry completely. You can also use your heat tool at this point. Okay, so for our next technique, you will need tags, watercolors this time, just 2 or 3 colors that work well together. Gesso, of course, a stencil or 2, a palette knife, and a couple of paint brushes. I'm using mop brushes or very heavy bristled brushes because I like to get a lot of coverage in this technique. Well, I'm back, and as it turned out, it didn't record, so I am so sorry about that. But here you can see that I used the gesso and palette knife and applied it over the stencil. And I just did parts of the tag. I didn't want to cover the whole thing, but there's a good amount of gesso there. Just make sure your gesso is completely dry before you add your watercolor paint. Now here are my paints, my watercolors. I just love these graphite colors. Oh, I just love the muted tones. And they're different brands, very similar. The colors vary just a little bit, just enough to show that there is a variation, because when you're using muted or gray tones, you want to have value. So there is a difference between the colors. Like the two greens that I'm working with are not the same type of green. So you'll see in a minute. And I think for this one, yeah, I'm going to start with this turquoisey color and then match it with the black blue, or start with the black blue and put it down. So this is why you want to make sure that your gesso is thoroughly dry, because you don't want it to move. And this is a nice and messy technique. I still have the paint underneath my nails. So I'm actually just blending. I'm just adding the paint, the water, the color down. And you do this in segments, if you will. You let it dry in between, because as you know, watercolors dry a lot lighter than when you're actually working with them. So yeah, work one tag at a time. You know, as I'm watching this, I'm not even changing the water, and I could have used the same brush. It really is okay. So now I'm working with this green black, is that what it says? And putting that color down. This is one of the colors I used for the little journal that I painted that I showed you earlier. And then this other green is more of an army green. So you can see we're building up contrast. Feel free to take an old rag or paper towel and dab up any wet buildup there. As you can see, it's wet, but the tags look pretty good. The watercolor is setting there on the sides, but it's okay. And if I had a piece of paper close to me at the time, I would have just used that paper to sop up the excess paint. What else can I say about this? It's very meditative, and I admit for me it's kind of hard to stop, and you never know what you're going to get. It comes out different all the time. Okay, now I'm working, yeah, two at a time, and just playing with the colors. So these have had a chance to dry now, and I wanted to show you something you can do after a tag is dried and you want to add some more. You can do this dipping motion. Just put it on your surface there and dip it so that you have you can see the contrast when it dries. Okay, so let's take a look at our completed tags. We'll start with this set first. These are the gesso and watercolor, and we worked on the middle and far left tags. And you can see on the right there, this is one I did off camera, and this is what happens when you have a little more gesso on your surface. So you can regulate and change the outcome of this technique depending on how much gesso you use. And again, it's important to make sure that it's dry. And I can't wait to do this with other colors as well. It's a lot of fun. Here's our acrylic set, and I like how these turned out. Believe it or not, the two cards, tags rather, this one that I'm holding and the one on the far left, are both I used the aquamarine blue on both of them, but look at the difference. The one on the right I used, I think it was burnt sienna. But anyway, so these are the cards that we worked on earlier. Now I want to show you something you can do, you can add on. For this, I used the smushing technique with the acrylic, but afterwards I went over it with some distressed mica stain. This one I just stenciled. I used that Color Magic paint, the one that has different colors within it in black. And I like how both of these turned out. They're kind of that Halloween shimmer. And I have a bit more, I have a few more samples to show you. These, again, they're very simple. I just, again, wanted to give you an example here of what you can do with these tags. Now, let's see. Let's look at the little Halloween girl on the left. So, this was, I think I sprayed the top with Oxide sprays, and then just collaged a doily. And this was the first time I painted the Tim Holtz dolls. I've never done it before. I love them both ways, and I could have added more detail, but I didn't. The one I'm holding now, the Mischief, that's a piece of collage paper. Now this one, I can't talk as fast as I'm pulling. I love this, and I just kept this very, very simple. Here's what I did. I sprayed the entire tag with Distress Mica. Then I used a stencil mask, or a mask rather, of a tree. And I used Payne's Gray and went all over it, and that's how I got that haunted look, or haunting in the woods look. And so again, just little samples of what you can make for your journals or for any other project. And I can't wait to see what you come up with. And here's my tag for the costumes and disguises prompt, a nod to Mrs. Lovett. First, I was totally inspired by Susie Hines, a sweet friend who is a design team member for Tim Holtz. I actually scrap lifted the structure of a tag that she designed last year. I used an acrylic smush tag as my base, but you really can't tell, but we know it's there. I added some painted papers from my stash, a leaf die cut from painted cardstock. I'm thinking of putting this S monogram on top of this button. It's scratched up. It is vintage. I don't believe it's Bakelite or celluloid, but it's vintage. And let's see, what else? I've collected a few dressmaker tags. I like the look of this vintage garment tag. It reminds me of the tags we would label each costume piece with. We'd have the actor's name inside of every single piece. On the back, I've added a picture of a man who could be Sweeney Todd. I collaged different elements, took a mini flashcard by Tim Holtz, and it said make. So I cut the M off and replaced it with a B for bake. Bake more hot pies. So I think I'll include this in the Sidekick journal as a tip-in. Thank you so much for watching. I hope it's inspired you to try some of these techniques in your own journal, and please tag me on Instagram or leave me a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Take care, happy Halloween, and bye for now, everyone.